One of the questions that I've been getting a lot of from people is they're asking me, is the market crashing? And here's my take on that. I don't know, and I've always said that the last few years in the triangle has been crazy. The rate that the home prices went up, and I know this is more indicative of what's going on nationally, but in the triangle, because it's such a great place for us to live, because if you're here in the triangle, you're 2 hours from the beach one way if you go east, and then if you go the other direction, you're 2 hours away from the mountains. So it is a wonderful, wonderful place for people of all ages to relocate to. So we saw a huge, huge surge, and we still have a demand. We still have a very strong market, and people are still moving here. However, I have always said that the rate that the properties were appreciating, that it wasn't sustainable, and that the market will eventually right size itself. The market would fix itself, and this is what it's doing. So to answer that question, we're not seeing a crash. What we are seeing is the market calming down, stabilizing, and getting back to really where it should be. For the last couple of years, the market here in the triangle has pretty much even priced out the first-time home buyer. So this is something that needed to happen, and this is a good thing that it is happening. So what we're seeing really is a mixed picture, but several signals are suggesting that the market is shifting from a red hot seller's market, which has been for a few years, towards a more balanced, and in some places even softening of the market in favor of the buyers. So what we have officially is that we do have a buyer's market now. And that's a good thing for both parties, in that buyers are out there and they're all looking to buy, but they have a lot more leverage in negotiating with the sellers because there's simply a lot more inventory for them to choose from. And that's inventory in resales as well as inventory in new construction. So depending on what you're looking for as a buyer, you really do have a lot of leverage. And, some submarkets are taking steeper hits, specifically in the area that we call the RTP, and the RTP stands for the Research Triangle Park. And that's kind of like anywhere from that angle of like maybe the Durham part of Briar Creek to the to the Raleigh part of Briar Creek to Morrisville to Cary. It kind of just encompasses some different parts of those areas. Prices went completely crazy. You were seeing 2,000 square foot townhomes going for $500,000-$600,000, which is expensive. So that is starting to be, that's starting to soften. This year we've seen about an 8 to 10% decline in the price for specifically those areas. And in other areas of quote unquote of the triangle and some of the outskirts of the triangle, we've seen something similar to that in the price of the price of decline. Now, as a reseller, if you own a home, you're thinking, oh my gosh, have I lost equity in my home? The chances are, the question to that is probably no, because again, you gain so much equity within the last few years that if you lose a little bit, a small percentage of that, that still doesn't hurt your equity. You can still sell, depending on when you bought, you can still sell and still realize a reasonable equity in your home. So what we're seeing is we're seeing more listings, obviously, a lot of inventory with the new construction. A lot of people who for whatever reason, some people have to sell their house, some people want to sell their house. Particularly at this time where they can get probably more equity in it than they think if they wait. We don't know what the market is going to do a year from now. We don't have a crystal ball. But so you're seeing a lot more inventory in the marketplace. So as a result of that, we're seeing longer months on the market. So before we were seeing basically record time where a lot of homes were selling. They're selling for multiple offers above asking. but we're seeing that some of the outskirts of the triangle, we're seeing probably close to 4 to 6 months before homes are selling, and that's actually getting to be more and more because there is more inventory in the market. So buyers, they're sitting. Another thing that I notice is that buyers, a lot of them, they're not in a hurry, especially if it's a move-up buyer or a buyer that's scaling down. They're not necessarily in any hurry to sell. So when they see something they like, they're basically, and I, as a buyer's agent, sometimes they're telling me, let's see if this is going to go down. If the seller is going to either decrease the price, or if it's a new construction, if the incentives are going to get better. And so what we're seeing in the market is that we're seeing buyers that are taking their time, they're patient, and they're just watching. So I say all this to say that from the seller perspective, when we go into the market, it's very, very important, more so now than ever, that timing is important, number one. And number two, it's important that we enter the market with a reasonable listing price so that we can get eyes on the property, and we can get a bunch of people to come in and look at the property. So again, we're seeing more of a stable market, which is something we haven't seen in the last few years in our market. So now we're seeing the right sizing, market is stabilizing, and we have more people that are going to jump into the buying market simply because there are more choices for them, and they can get better deals because we can negotiate better, because sellers are sometimes now they're anxious to sell, and builders are also anxious to sell. They don't want to take this inventory into the following year. So between now and the end of the year with new construction, we're going to be seeing a lot of really, really great sales, if we can call it that. So from a long-term perspective, what does this mean? From a long-term perspective, again, this is my take on it. Basically, what this means is that I always tell people, if you're in a position to buy, let's go ahead and buy. It's always going to be a good time to buy because it's real estate, it's a good investment. But from a long-term perspective, again, what we're seeing is that the market is right-sizing itself, it's correcting itself. So homes are becoming more and more affordable, which is not something we've seen the last few years. And this works both for the buyers and the sellers, because eventually if you're on the sell side, eventually you're going to be on the buy side. So no matter which side you're on, this right sizing or this correction of the market is good news for all parties. All right. So having said all this, the story is not really one of collapse. Let's calm down. The sky is not falling. Our market is not crashing. Again, we live in a great demographic market in terms of things to do. So we attract a lot of different demographics, a lot of different age groups, different stages in life. We now have a lot of semi-retired and retirees that are coming back here because they want to be closer to their children and their grandchildren. So we're just attracting a lot of people for different reasons, which is one of the uniquely wonderful things about our market, is that we really have something for everybody, no matter what stage of life you're in. And as long as we continue to have that, we're always going to be in demand. It's always going to be a great place to buy property because your property is always going to appreciate. Now, we're not going to see double-digit appreciation like we've seen in the past, but again, we're going back to that 3 to 4%. In certain areas, maybe 5 to 7% in other areas, depending on where you are, which has been the traditional norm, and we are getting back to that. So we are entering kind of a market that's a softer plateau and a gentler slope. So just kind of think of it as a cooling off rather than a crash, I guess is the best way for me to put it.